We left off last video creating our network call. Now let's put that network call to use. Okay, so in Appetizers, and I promise the next video is project organization. So we're gonna clean this mess up over here. One more file. So Command N for new file, new Swift file, hit next. We're gonna call this remote image. We're actually gonna have a couple objects in this file because I find it easier to keep this all together rather than separate, less confusing. Okay, so we definitely wanna import Swift UI. And now we're going to create a couple of objects, like one is an observable object, similar to a view model, but like not the same, that we use with our custom Swift UI image. So this is going to be multiple puzzle pieces working together. So as we build this out initially, you may be like, what's going on? But as you've seen in all these videos, at the very end, I walk through it to connect all the dots for you to hopefully help you understand. So if you're a little confused while we're building this out, don't worry, I got you. So the first thing we're going to create is our image loader, which is that class. So final class image loader, and this does conform to observable object because we are going to have a property of an image, var image, that is a Swift UI image. And for right now, it's going to be optional, and we're going to give it a default value of nil. So what this image loader does is it actually downloads the image and then it broadcasts, hey, I've got my image, right? Just like the view model does, right? It broadcasts its changes. So in order to do that, I got to make this published, right? Because we want to know when this image changes. And this image is going to change when we have a successful network call. So now we got to make that network call here. So we can do func load from URL string. And again, similar to what we did, we're just going to call this URL string, and that is of type string. A lot of strings there. And then here we call network manager dot shared dot download image, from URL string. Well, that's going to be the URL string that we pass in here. So URL string, and then the completion handler is going to be image, and then we get rid of the parentheses. Now remember, this image is optional, so we have to handle both cases if it's nil or if we actually have an image. And we're going to handle that nil case first. So guard let image. Okay, I messed up the naming. We actually want this to be UI image, just for clarity, as you'll see in a little bit, because we're going to be talking about Swift UI images and UI image. So we don't want to get those confused. So we want to be very clear that this is a UI image. So I messed up my naming. So we can do guard let UI image equals UI image. Else, and then we're just going to return here, so we're going to keep that on one line. Else return, because again, we're not handling the errors, we're just showing the placeholder if things go wrong. So now that we've unwrapped the optional, like we know we have our UI image, we need to set this image here, the Swift UI image, to the UI image. Hopefully that wasn't confusing. Maybe this will help you out here. So we do self.image equals, and we're going to initialize an image. And this is a Swift UI image, not the UI image, but an initializer on the Swift UI image. You'll see I can initialize one from a UI image, right? And that's the UI image we have. So this is why I wanted to be clear and name this UI image and not image to be confusing, right? I wanted to definitely separate the two. Now again, one thing that trips people up, remember, yes, we're just setting the data behind the scenes here, but because this is published, it's going to trigger a UI change, right? Because once the download is successful and we set our image equal to the actual image we have, we're going to redraw the UI and show the downloaded image. So because this triggers a UI change, we want to dispatch this to the main queue. So dispatch queue, and by the way, I just tried it, so I don't have it on this machine, but on my development machine, my laptop, I have a code snippet where I just type DQ and it types out dispatch queue.main.async because you type this so often. So little tip there, if you want to create a code snippet, I would recommend that. So Command X, Command V to paste that in there. So now we're updating our image on the main thread to trigger the UI update. Okay, so that's the first piece of the puzzle. This image loader is what downloads the image. The second piece of the puzzle, which is kind of just like a helper for the final piece, and it'll make more sense when I get everything together, is going to be a struct just called remote image, and it's going to be of type view. Now we're in just the regular Swift UI view here. And a property on here is going to be var image and is of Swift UI image, but it's going to be optional because again, it's going to use this that returns. We may not have it, right? If the network call fails, we get a nil. So we got to make this optional. And then here we're going to have var body some view. This is just the standard initializer, for Swift UI. And here we're returning, this is where we want to return an image, like a Swift UI image. So if we have image, we're just going to return what we got back. So image. And it's an optional. We'll call .resizable because .resizable is one of those custom modifiers that can only be called on an image. That'll come into play later, but just remember this is why we have to call resizable here. So if we have the image, cool, just, the remote image is that image. However, if it's nil, we don't have it, here's where we want to return an image except the name here is food dash placeholder. And I just realized we forgot to bring this in. So I'm going to bring this in. This file, of course, will be attached below the video, but I'm going to drag this into our XC assets so we have it. So if I go to my Finder here, I got it ready. See, these are all the images. Here's my food placeholder, and then we'll drag that. Whoop, let me open up XC assets, go back to Finder, drag that into here, and hopefully you do the same thing. And then you get this nice placeholder image that will look good on both light and dark mode. So now back to our remote image, that's what we're gonna do. If we have an image that's returned nicely from the network call, show that, give it the resizable modifier. If we don't, if we have nil, show the image with the food placeholder, also dot resizable. So that is puzzle piece number 2, and it's really just the helper for puzzle piece number 3. Because if you don't have this helper, you'd have to write some pretty convoluted code and confusing code in the third puzzle piece. So we're going to write that right now. And this is actually what we're going to use in our usual Swift UI code. So this is going to be struct. We're going to call this Appetizer remote image, and it is of type view. And again, it is the typical Swift UI view. So we want to do var body some view and get that all set up. Now this is going to have 2 properties. We want a state. I'm going to scroll up here. My head's probably getting in the way. State object var that is a image loader, right? This is what we want to have attached, that we're watching this image loader, right? So var image loader, and that equals a new image loader. We're initializing a new one here. And then the other thing we need is a URL string, right? Because when we create this Appetizer remote image, we need to know what URL to load from. So let URL string, and that is of type string. So that's what we're going to pass in based on what Appetizer we have. Okay, so now here's where this helper comes in, right? We're gonna, for our body of our view, we're just going to return a remote image, right? That's what we have here, up here. And the initializer for the remote image, if you saw that, takes in an image, which is an optional image. So what we want to pass in here is the image that's attached to our image loader, right? Remember this image that gets returned after the network call is done? So right away, that image is going to be nil. But after the network call, finishes successfully, it's going to make this image, not nil, it'll make it the image. This will broadcast the change. Our Appetizer remote image, because we have this set up here as a state object, is listening for that change, and then it will redraw and create its image, with the image we have here. So I do image loader.image. Right, so I'm initializing this remote image with whatever we get back from the network call or the placeholder until we get anything back. Now, you'll notice when I just draw this once, image loader.image is nil. So I gotta trigger the network call somehow. So when this remote image appears, so we'll do on appear and put the closure afterwards. So when this image appears, I want to call image loader dot load image from URL string. And what URL string do I want to load from? Well, whatever we passed in based on the Appetizer we have. It's from URL string. Put a space there, and we'll remove this space. Okay, so like I said, here are the 3 puzzle pieces. I know I've kind of walked through it as I've gone, but I understand this may be confusing. So I'm going to do one more walkthrough now that we have all the pieces in place, and hopefully it'll make a little more sense. So this Appetizer remote image is what we're going to use like on our list view to replace our just regular image placeholder. And what happens when this appears on screen, right? Because on appear happens. Well, when on appear happens, we call image loader.load. Remember, our image loader we have attached here as a state object, right? So it's attached to our view. Well, the image loader is going to call load. It's going to make the network call. If the network call's bad, it's going to stay nil, right? So we're going to show the placeholder. If the network call's good, this image is going to flip to the good image because it's published. Remember, it broadcasts the change. Our Appetizer remote image is going to see the change and say, okay, I got to redraw. And now when it redraws, it initializes our remote image with an image, and it's going to use the image loader.image. Well, what is our image loader.image now? It's no longer nil because we had a good network call. It's going to be the actual picture of mozzarella sticks. So that's what we're going to show. So that's how this little puzzle piece works. And again, the remote image is just kind of a helper to make this code kind of clean. You'd have to write some pretty weird stuff. I tried. I couldn't get it working. It was weird. So the helper was nice. So that's kind of what's going on here. Now let's put it into play here on our Appetizer list view and then test it and see if it works, right? We've been coding for 2 videos without testing. Let's see if this works. So I'm sorry, not our Appetizer list view, our Appetizer list cell, right? And what we want to replace here, and I'm going to pull up the canvas, minimize it there a little bit, hit resume, should pop up. Okay, previews. Am I right? Never mind. Get out of here. We're good. This is, by the way, I just downloaded Xcode 12.2 the other day, so maybe that's why it's taking longer. Anyway, we just want to replace this. Remember this generic image we had that was just the Asian flank steak all the time? It's kind of our placeholder. Well, now we don't want that image. We want our appetizer remote image. And when we initialize that, right, that takes in a URL string. And the URL string we want to pass in is our appetizer.image URL. Right? And you'll notice, remember, this is what I said, resizable is one of those modifiers that can only go on an image. Well, even though our appetizer remote image, like, is basically an image, we're doing some other stuff to it, and it's not just that raw image. That's why, going back to that remote image, like that's why we had to put resizable here, because this is actually on the image, right? So we're handling the resizable stuff, abstracted away. So on our actual cell here, we can just delete the resizable because we're already doing that. And you see, we even if we wanted to do it here, we couldn't because that only goes onto an image. So do Command B, get a build, should be good to go. All right. Moment of truth. Last time this didn't work out so well. Again, I haven't tested this. I'm just building it now. So first time, let's see if this works. Bam, there we go. Nice. No more embarrassing debugging on the fly, even though I think it might have been helpful. But yeah, so you see, we have our images here. We're no longer just looking at Asian flank steak. We're pulling up the proper images for each appetizer. Now, let me break this down again real quick. So we'll stop this. We'll pull up the network link conditioner, turn this on. This is just a valuable tool. If you didn't bother to set it up last video or last time I showed this, go do it. It's very valuable. So I can show you what's going on here. So I turned it on. I'm on very bad network. Now let's run it again. And you'll see kind of the process here slower. First of all, we get our spinner. That's fine. We're going to get back all of our JSON for that. And you're going to see the images start slowly loading in, right? So you can see we're showing the placeholder until we get the proper image. And I'm scrolling up and down real fast to show you that, we're still getting the proper images. Yeah, so you can see while the image loader image is nil, we're showing the placeholder. Wow, this is really bad. There it goes. So here we're showing the final image once it's finally downloaded. So hopefully slowing down the network connection showed you the process because it happens pretty fast. I have Google Fiber here. Weird flex, I know. But anyway, our image loader is in place. That wraps up this portion. Our list is looking good. In the next video, we're finally going to tackle this mess over here and start organizing our project.